I think Steiner says exactly that. In fact, if you read the lectures, he begins to look very carefully at the fact that Levi-Straussism, Marxism, Freudianism all become forms of surrogate or substitute theology. So you have a vacuum, and then you have to have something that enters into that vacuum to provide a structure or context for a center belief. Now, that's responding to, it seems to be, an essentially human need. We can't dismiss it. We can't do violence to it. We can try to better understand it, certainly, and try to contain its excesses. But the part of the problem is, and the quotation mentioned earlier, because we keep using the American example as if somehow it's normative. I can't, first of all, the large number of Americans I know in the university setting, 90% of the Americans will subscribe to this kind of madness. These seem to be largely caricatures. You know, portraits of excess, rather than in any way balanced representations of authentic and integrated religious living. So, I mean, if we look at the examples that are disordered, yes, we can certainly come from that with a very jaded view, or at least confirmed view, of religion as one of the great agents of disorder. But if we look at it from a different perspective, it seems to me we can get a better understanding of what faith means.
Yes. Jordan Peters.
I have an interesting historical anecdote with regards to that point. I was at a political meeting that was organized by Preston Manning about a year ago on the interface between religion and politics, and I heard a Gallup pollster make a claim that I'd never heard before. I'm going to preface this with an observation that Quebec underwent a religious revolution in the late 1950s, so it was kind of like the last European country in which Christianity really fell. The Gallup pollster did a poll, and he demonstrated a fact I'd never heard before, which was that if you were a lapsed Catholic in Quebec, you were 10 times more likely to be a separatist. And what that meant was that for the Quebecois, in the absence of Catholicism, nationalism poured in to fill the void. And nationalism tends to be based on race and ethnicity, and it tends towards terrible excesses. And the consequence of the collapse of Catholicism and the rise of nationalism was the fact our country was just about fragmented, right, twice. And that would have been a catastrophe. That's a good example.
It's not necessarily true, Jordan. I mean, it's quite possible that the kind of people who wanted to be separatists couldn't tolerate being Catholic for a long time. They just don't want to be, they're just not conformists. You're not necessarily right. But the really important thing that I think we all agree, there are serious downsides occasionally to religion. It doesn't matter whether they're intrinsic or extrinsic. What does matter is that we can cut the wire between belief and behavior. We can actually stop ourselves killing in God's name by understanding, which is where the European huge expenditure of money might actually yield something. Once we do understand that basically beliefs are generated around, somewhere around the temporal lobe area, somewhere in a system around, and unfortunately they are very close to and feed into the limbic system and the amygdala. Once we realize that this is, as it were, a design flaw of the human brain, we can actually compensate for it, and we can be inspired, we can be transcendent, which is absolutely
Let me get Nika for a second. Let me bring Nika in for a second, because you told us at the beginning of the program, and got a good laugh out of it actually, I'm nothing, you said. Would you counsel or advise nothingness as a good way to live?
Nothingism, I think you mean.
Nothingism, okay. Nothingism as a good way to live?
Well, you know, I tend to try to stay away from isms in general. I find a lot of the conversation revolves around these isms. I was an art history major in college, and I couldn't stand those isms either. Because as soon as you have an ism, you have a million exceptions to the rule. And so really, these labels that we stick on people, just so that we don't actually have to get to know them, are really starting to bother me. The reason that I call myself nothing is not because I have no conviction. Maybe I even have faith. I may even have belief, but I don't want to be part of this whole kind of thing.
If you have faith or belief, what do you have it in?
Lots of things that I don't understand. For instance, I don't have all the answers. Why are we here? I don't know. Why is the sky blue? Well, that one I might have figured out. You know, what happens to you after you die? I don't know. And so I have, you know, faith, because I don't really mind the word faith as much as I think you do, that there are reasons, I just may not know them. Now, I also have a friend who's Catholic who said to me, what you call nothing, I call God. So I fully accept that there are many approaches and that there are overlaps. And that what really stuns me is so much time is wasted because everybody wants everybody else to be what they are. And the whole exclusivity clause of all the major religions that I've studied is really the big problem. Like, what we really need is a modern day prophet to come rising out of the water or the air or something and say, you know what? I think we got that little piece wrong.
Are atheists an
Because-
exception to that?
No, atheists are not an exception
They
to that.
want people to be atheists as well?
There are people who want to convince you, everyone, that they should be what they are, what he is. Thinking of a person in particular. No, I mean, I think there are this new crop of they've been called evangelical atheists. But the point is that all the discussion is great, but then you have to go back out there and live your lives, and you have to live next to people who are different from you in a myriad of ways. So if we could have conversations like this that are on a very high level and where there's a sort of a accepted respect. Okay, we've got a little line down the middle here because, you know,
Between us.
unbelievers, non-believers, and believers. But you know what? I wish that this could be the discourse in the real world.
Ron.
I'd like to, I mean, I totally agree with this, and I would like to support it with a suggestion that the philosopher Dan Dennett has made, a very practical suggestion, which just a week after I'd heard it, turns out to be exactly what Quebec has done. And that is that everybody in every school should be compulsorily taught religion. But not one religion. They should be taught the facts about all the major religions of the world.
Yes, and
then your nothing son,
right.
your nothing son and daughter would then be free to say, hey, I think that this Hindu stuff is really great.
And I teach
And your
them- I
daughter
take that
could
on
say,
myself.
oh yeah, well, but look, I think I prefer the Buddhist. What do you think? And in this way, nothing would actually be everything.
Right.
But it would avoid the exclusiveness and the faith problem.
Right, but the problem with that, though, is who's teaching those courses, because you know, we have a lot of problems in America with the separation of church and state and infringement. So I would, you know.
But I guess the advantage of his way is that we're not what we are by default. We are what we are because we've chosen.
Exactly.